Ryan Michler, welcome back to the Line Within Us. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. It's good to be back. It hasn't been too long since we did one before. I don't remember when it was, but it wasn't that long ago. I know that.
No, it wasn't, man. It was only a couple months, and we did that Turning Sons to Men conversation. That we had a lot of great feedback from that. Well, I got your book here, the Masculinity Manifesto. We'll have the links in the show notes for all the guys, because if you haven't bought this by the end of this conversation, shame on you guys. Go and make this happen. This is a great book. I was able to get an early copy, do a read through it. So I'm looking forward to the conversation with you, Ryan. And
awesome.
Going back a few months ago, man, like Supreme Court nominee, she couldn't even answer what is a woman. So for you, man, like what is a man? Let's just start there, bro.
Yeah, I think it is a misconception that a man is just simply his biology. That isn't true. Because if that was true, we would call a 2-year-old little boy a man. We don't. So clearly It's more than biology. So I don't mean to be crude, but a lot of guys, when I talk about what does it mean to be a man, a lot of guys will say, well, you have a dick and balls, so you're a man. No, because again, look at a 2-year-old. That doesn't define a man. So what does define it? Well, there's male, being a male. That's simply biological. And that's having, obviously the right anatomy and the hormones that are coursing through our veins in utero and all the way up through puberty and into our adult lives that make us male, that cause us to be bigger and hairier and stronger. I'm speaking in broad generalities here, but that's male. But then being a man is more than that. It's our ability to harness our masculine characteristics towards productive outcomes. So when we see somebody and we think, oh man, that's a man right there, it's usually redeeming qualities like he's chivalrous or he's strong or he's a great competitor or he's wealthy, which generally takes some sort of mastery or acumen. So when we look at a man or we say, oh man, he's being manly, right? It's something more. We as society honor and acknowledge that there's some sort of graduation into manhood. There's a lot of confusion about what that is, but at the bottom of the bottom line, at the end of the day, being a man is somebody who can protect himself and other people, somebody that provides for himself and his loved ones and even complete strangers, and presides, steps up into leadership, again, first for himself and then over and for other people. I don't expect that of my sons. They're males, they're boys, but they're not men. We don't even expect them to be, but we're trying to get them to that point. I think we talked about that in the last conversation.
Yeah, we did. And that preside part, I'm so glad you went there, because I think so many times, guys, we get that off track. We take that preside part and we don't really understand what that means of being a man. So when you try to explain that preside part to other guys, how do you get them in the right state of mind to understand really what that means?
Well, preside is synonymous with leadership. And I want to throw a disclaimer out here. I'm not suggesting that I have this all figured out. I'm not suggesting that I'm the epitome of manliness, that I know more about being a man than anybody else. I don't. In fact, I would say I'm middle or less than middle of the pack when it comes to how I show up. I fail and I fall short in so many ways, and I struggle with my own personal issues and demons and relationship issues and everything else. I want to put that out there. With regards to your question, preside, it's having integrity. It's having vision. It's being able to communicate and articulate what that vision is. It's getting people to a place they could not have imagined going on their own. It's sacrifice. It's service. All of these things that we think about with leadership is what it requires to preside for and over other people. And there is a misconception that men should be completely dominant and subjugate other people. And I don't think very many people believe that necessarily, but that is something that you'll see quite often, or at least in people's behavior. And I'm guilty of that too. I'm guilty of being controlling or even manipulative to get what it is I want. And I need to be really clear that isn't leadership. I'm not exhibiting leadership when I'm doing that. It's actually more akin to tyranny or dictatorship when I'm acting that way. Leadership is about helping others get to a place, as I said earlier, that they could not have imagined going on their own, but they have a say in the matter. They get to decide, do I want to follow this person? And if the answer is yes, then you're leading. If the answer is no, then we have work to do. But leadership is something that can't be forced upon other people. It has to be offered up by other people.
Yes. Amen. I mean, I think the whole word that you talked about there, to preside equals serve, the service of others. And so often we get that off track as guys. We're not thinking that service aspect. We just want to just be over them. We just want them to report up to us versus, hey, man, the most effective leaders, even if you look in the military, it's all about serving and bringing that unity together.
Yeah, it's very ego driven, right? And again, this is me. I'm very ego driven. Well, where does the ego come from? It actually comes from insecurities. And these are things that I'm trying to learn myself, is my own insecurities through things that I've dealt with when I was younger, things that I've dealt with over the past 5 or 10 years. Our insecurities manifest themselves as ego. It's a defense mechanism, right? So for example, if I get jealous about something or envious about another person's success, it really has nothing to do with the other person and more to do with my own insecurity. If I think that I'm weak and so I overcompensate by barking orders at people and trying to build up power so I can have authority over others, then that's ego. I'm trying to hide the insecurity of weakness. If I have an insecurity of abandonment, maybe your father left when you were young, or your mother did, or your father died, or your mother died. And as a young boy, you interpreted that as them abandoning you, which is something that I've recognized that I deal with personally. Then I'm going to try to control and manipulate other people and coerce them into not abandoning me. That's ego. And it's to cover up and overcompensate for our own insecurities that we deal with.
Right. Man, that's powerful stuff. And I mean, one thing you talked about early in your book, you talked about influence, authority, credibility. I think guys in particular, influence and authority, that comes natural. I think guys, they see that they want that. But what threw me off is when you threw that word credibility in. That's something I think a lot of guys, they're not thinking about that. So I'm so glad you went there. So, why is that credibility so important when you're trying to really lay out the pillars?
Well, it's credibility is foundational. I mean, you have to have some sort of mastery or acumen towards that thing if you want to build up influence with other people. So let's break this down. Influence is your ability to have other people volunteer to modify their behavior based on you. Right. They're voluntarily. That's a great way to say it. I don't even think I said that in the book. I should have. Influence is them modifying their behavior because of you. And voluntary, it's got to be voluntarily. Right. Like, so for example, I could tell, when I talked about this in the book, I could tell my child, clean your room. And they will modify their behavior, but is it necessarily influence? No, not necessarily. If I say, if you don't clean your room, you don't get to watch TV tonight. Right. That's right. That's not influence. And I'm not saying that's entirely wrong either. Sometimes that's appropriate with our kids. There has to be consequences, but let's not pretend it's influence. It's not. You're just getting compliance. Right. You're not getting commitment from them, which is one of the chapters in the book, compliance versus commitment, or subchapters rather. So influence, again, is them voluntarily modifying their behavior because of you. Authority, that comes from, if we look at this as a hierarchy, that comes from the person you're wishing to influence. So that would be below you in not in worth or anything like that, but I'm just talking about this in this hierarchy. Authority is typically granted from above. So your boss might say, hey, now you have, because you've done X, Y, and Z, you now have the authority to lead this team or manage this project or whatever it might be. But credibility is what determines whether or not you will have influence and authority with other people. That's mastery over a certain subject. That's the ability to produce results. That's definitely rooted in an element of trust. And so if a lot of people do this backwards, they think, well, once I get the title, then people will listen to me. They might, but it is an influence again. Remember, that's right. They might listen to you because they don't want to lose their job. So is that really the kind of people you want to lead? Is that really how you want to quote unquote lead other people? No. So the best way to build up influence, credibility, influence and authority is by building up your credibility by
Right.
doing things that high achievers and high producers do.
Yeah. I mean, and that takes time, right? And an investment in yourself to build up that credibility to be able to prove yourself.
Yeah, it takes time if you're starting from a level playing field, from a level surface, but all too often we're actually trying to dig ourselves out of a hole, let alone starting from a neutral position. Right? We've done so many things with our wives or with our children or with a boss or a client that have undermined it and rooted away any sense of credibility that we had. And now we're digging ourselves out of a hole. We're not even starting on ground level. We're having to dig ourselves out of the hole first, even to get to some neutral level and then continue to go. So it's a lifelong pursuit.
No doubt. Definitely a lifelong pursuit, man. So, I mean, kind of moving along in your book here, one area that I wanted to pick your brain about was the mindset. And I love how you brought up this analogy of the superhero mentality. And so many times as guys, I know it was me as the dad, I got 3, I got 1 that's going to be here in a month. You feel like you got to do it all. You got to be all things to all people at all times, and you can't ever let them down. And you're trying to hold all these things up, and the weight of the world's on you, man. And it can just be so draining, Ryan. So, I mean, just reading that chapter on superhero mentality helped me. So, man, how can you maybe unpack some nuggets of that for our listeners on how to get out of that mindset and be able to recognize that, like, yo, we are just human at the end of the day.
Well, again, it's ego. So if you're trying to be a superhero and you're running around trying to save everybody from themselves, why are you doing that? Are you doing that for them? Or are you doing that for yourself because you're going to either get the accolades, the praise, the notoriety, the income, the bonuses, the promotions, and everything that comes with it? And so if your motive is to prop yourself up, yeah, you're going to run around and you're going to save other people. But are you really serving them by doing that? Probably not.
Right.
Probably not. If you really care about other people, you won't run around and try to rescue them from their problems, but instead you'll try to help them work through their own issues and struggles. It's the old adage of teaching a man to fish versus feeding him a fish.
Right.
Like I could come in and I could give you some money. Let's say you're struggling with finances and you're struggling to make your mortgage or your bills. I could come in, Chris, and I could lend you a couple $1,000s to get you through the month. Sure. Absolutely. But actually, I'm hamstringing you. Like I could be the superhero in that moment, right? I could save the day. Chris and his family are saved and they can stay in their house another month because Ryan came in and gave them a couple $1,000s to pay their mortgage. And then I get to beat my chest and flex and show everybody how great I am because I saved Chris.
Right.
Well, okay. But how does that? And there are moments for that. There are moments where that would be appropriate. Like if you're a close friend and you're struggling,
right?
Yeah, I would do that for sure. But it's out of care, not out of propping myself up.
That's right.
But if on the other hand, I said, hey, Chris, you've talked to me about some financial issues that you're having, and I've got some projects around the house I need to do because we have an event coming up. And if you come over for the next couple of days and you help me with this particular project or clean up my barn or get things set up, I'll pay you $1,000.
Yeah.
Right now, now I still served you. I didn't rescue you. I offered you a hand and I served you, but I made you earn that. And now you're better off than you were 24 hours earlier because you earned that. And you can still look your wife and kids in the eye and say, no, I earned this mortgage payment.
That's right.
You actually went out and did work.
That's right.
Maybe a silly example, but.
No, I mean, I think it's a great example. I'm so glad you went there because I mean, so many guys, the stress and the anxiety of life, we feel like we have to be all things to all people. And, we don't have that Superman underneath our shirt, man. I mean, that's just not a reality. And I think just giving ourselves some grace there goes a long way. So I just appreciate you going there and dedicating a whole chapter of your new book to really helping guys that may be struggling with that.
I struggle with that too. As I read the book, and I have over and over and over again, and then I read it for the audio version, I was like, oh, not doing that. Oh, not very good at that. Oh, I could do better at that. And so I thought I was writing this book for other people, and it turns out I was actually writing it for myself.
Yeah.
That's a manual for me. And when I slip up, I can look at it and say, well, the manual's right there. Like, I just need to do that.
I just got to start doing it, right?
Right. Or do it better or, but I struggle like everybody else, especially because of the position I'm in, which I put myself here, is that order of man, and I lead these men, and I'm trying to serve these men. And so I think a lot of the times I have to be perfect. There's a lot of stress that comes with that.
Yeah.
And if it's too much and too high and you don't have an outlet for it, man, it's gonna come tumbling down.
Something's gonna pop eventually. Hey guys, we're gonna take a quick break. We'll be right back. Most men know what it's like to do life in a vacuum and feel isolated on the journey. We believe every man needs a community to help them become the men they were created to be. More than just a website or podcast, we are a community of Christian men who are committed to supporting and encouraging one another on our journey to become the best versions of ourselves. We are men who have fought the good fight and come out victorious. The lion within us is here to help you stop feeling lost, defeated, and alone. Instead, find community and connection with other men that will help you achieve your goals, live a life of purpose, and be the leader God intends you to be. Visit thelionwithin.us to join the new growing Lions Den community today. Now, Ryan, you mentioned talking about, you're leading the order of man. You got all this stress and you're trying, all these different things going on. You can't be everything to everybody. So that leads me to the next part of the book that for me, I think resonated the most, and I'm struggling with it. So maybe you can help me with it as I think through it. And it's talking about rendering yourself obsolete. And as a dad, I have a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, two babies. So definitely different places in life. So far as, my 1-year-old, she relies on me for everything. Right. And I mean, it's that stage where you literally have to take care of them or they're going to die, versus my 12-year-old, much more independent, reaching points in life. And I think you either put in your book, it was one of your podcasts where like the first time it hit for you, I think you were somewhere with your sons, maybe a basketball game, and you went there with them and they bounced and they left you and you were just sitting there, by yourself. I remember you talking about that. And I'm getting more and more of those moments with my daughters. And the whole mindset of rendering myself obsolete, really, it struck me hard, man. But it's so doggone accurate. And then you start applying that to work too. Guys get really squirrely when you start talking about that from your professional standpoint. Because at the Lion, I'm trying to do the same thing. As we grow, I foresee a day just like you, with your Ask Me Anything, and your where you have like Kip and some of those guys, they come in and you're not even there. And the show keeps going on, right? You're building that stuff in. But for some guys, that takes a high level of security as who you are as a man to be able to release some of that stuff. And I would love to get your take on this more, on this idea of rendering ourselves obsolete and why that's so important as we grow as leaders and as men.
Well, again, it comes back to ego, right? So many of us don't want to put ourselves out of work. You want your kids to always need you. You don't want to train up your competition. That's when I hear a lot when it comes to the professional world, or you don't want somebody to pass you up or show you up or make you look bad in the professional arena. I get it. I understand all that. But again, if you're going to serve other people, whether it's your kids or people at work, your coworkers, colleagues, then you need to do a good job of making sure that they could not only replace you, but they could actually excel above and beyond what you've been able to. How rewarding is that if you see one of your kids who got further than you? I mean, my oldest son, he's playing football. My three boys are playing football, and my youngest, he's 6. He's playing flag football. This is his first year, and my other two, 14 and 12, are playing, and they've played for about 4 years now. And my oldest son is actually bigger than me. He's 14 years old. He's 6 foot. He's 165 pounds. He's bigger than me. He's not heavier than me yet, but he's taller than me, and he's gonna be bigger than me for sure. And I see what he does on the football field as a freshman. He's starting both sides of the ball in JV. He's got a little varsity playing time already, and it's so rewarding, fulfilling to see that he's doing better than I ever did as a kid in that arena, and I had a manager, this was probably 10 or 15 years ago, where she always ran a very good store. This was a retail clothing store that I worked at. And I was in a management development track with that. And she had such a great ability to train up other people, myself included, to go out and manage and run different stores. And she took great pride and satisfaction in knowing that not only did she run a good store herself, but she was responsible for training up so many other people, dozens and dozens of other people, to go out and them having their own successful stores. So we call this a force multiplier. When I first moved to Maine, I went up and spent a couple of days with Border Patrol here in Maine. And they talked about this concept of force multiplier, like a helicopter, for example, or a plane can see more than any one person, or camera equipment, or a fence is a force multiplier because there doesn't need to be one person at, every couple hundred yards to manage the border.
Right.
They call them force multipliers. Well, as a leader, you should be a force multiplier. Like if you're just going at it alone and you think that you're going to get what you want, or you're going to serve as many people as you possibly could by yourself, man, you're sorely mistaken. So when you talk about the Ask Me Anything that we do, and I have Kip and Sean or Drew run those even without myself, how amazing is that? Those guys can run it. They can do an excellent job. They can give insight that I couldn't necessarily give because they're different people. And then what I can do is now I can go out and I can spend time with my family, or go on a hunt, or focus on a different business project. And so when we learn to render ourselves obsolete, we become force multipliers, and we leverage ourselves for the betterment of our goals and visions and desires.
Right. Man, that is just absolutely killer, man. I mean, and when I brought this up, I think I brought it up at a discipleship group that I was leading, and talking with the guys, and particularly around, they had a couple of them have younger kids. And when I brought that up, man, they looked at me like I had three heads, man. Like, what are you talking about? I don't even want to think about rendering myself obsolete. But I'm telling you, that's a mindset shift that if we can make as men, I see so much value. Just hats off to you for recognizing that area and calling it out. Because I think that just that one little nugget for me is something that I'm constantly thinking through ever since I read the book now. All right, what do I need to be doing to actually do a better job of serving the ones that I love? And sometimes that means not doing stuff that I've enjoyed doing for years just because I've been doing it. But, I got to give some of that up. And there's a new season that of life that's coming. I just need to embrace that.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the hardest parts is you have to give up, you have to sacrifice in order to do that. And there are things that you might enjoy doing. There are things that you're really good at doing. There are also ego-driven things, like we've talked about as the thread line for this conversation. You're being egotistical when you hear yourself say, well, if you want it done right, you have to do it yourself.
Right.
Really? You're so arrogant to believe that not a single soul on this planet out of 8 billion people could do it just as good or not better than you? Really?
Right.
Is that really what you think? That's a ridiculous thought. Yeah. And besides, if you have somebody who can't do it as good as you and they're on your team, then shame on you for not training them to be able to do that.
Amen, man.
Or you might hear yourself saying, well, like I said, if you want it done right, you have to do it yourself, or just any number of these things where you think that it all rests on your shoulders. And you know what? It actually might for a little while.
Right.
Like it might be the case where you have somebody else. For example, when Kip started running a podcast with me, he was not nearly as good as he is now, just like I wasn't when I started podcasting. So what do? We give him opportunities and we give him reps, and he gets better and better and better and better. Yeah. And then you give training and feedback and guidance and direction, and then more opportunities. And if you don't want to look at it as rendering yourself obsolete, fine. Don't look at it like that. Look at it as you becoming a force multiplier, if that's a better way for you to look at it. This is the same thing, though.
Right. I think it's cool. I mean, I'm okay with the obsolete part. I think for me, that stands out. I can definitely relate and see the power behind that. So, man, thank you. And by the way, Kip does a great job. Love hearing him
most of the time
on the show. Yeah, we don't want to pump him up too much, right?
Yeah, no, he's already got a big head. No, he always does a great job. He always does a great job.
Yeah, love those Ask Me Anythings, man. You guys there's so much value in those episodes. And guys, by the way, if you're not listening to Order of Man and you're listening to this, shame on you. So we'll make sure that link's in the show notes too, because I mean that's a go-to. I only have a couple of podcasts every week that I'm religious about, and bro, yours is definitely one of them. So thank you. And I think your Friday field notes it feels like to me they've shifted. They're really personal lately. Like you're sharing some intimate things. It sounds like that's going on in your life. I just appreciate the vulnerability that you're offering up in those episodes, man. Because I'm getting a lot just from your last one in particular, just a lot around just listening to where you're at and your journey and things that you got going on and how much you're willing to share.
Yeah, it's hard to do that. It's good for me. I like to talk. That's the way I process. We have these attachment styles. You have avoidance attachment. You have anxious attachment. And I tend to be more of that, the anxious attachment, but being able to talk about and work through these things. So the podcast has been very therapeutic for me.
Yeah.
Because I get to flesh out a lot of these ideas that I've been thinking about and talk to other people who might be experiencing the same thing. I've also noticed that when I open up and actually share something genuine, something real, something I'm really struggling with, it always connects on a deeper level with other people. The conversations that other people are having because I've done that is pretty cool. And it wouldn't take place if I wasn't willing to share myself.
That's it, man. I mean, for us, like the episode where I talked about my bouts with anxiety over the years, and then the episodes where I talked about me losing our daughter and grieving as a man, grieving the loss of a child. Those are the episodes that connected to most of the people and we get the most feedback on. But I mean, it took a lot of courage just to get those stories out there, right? I mean, you turn a mic on, you're talking to a camera, you know how it is. I mean, but if you're not a podcaster, you don't really, I guess you really can't understand what it's like to be able to get that vulnerable to try behind the mic, but there's tons of value in it, man. So just thank you for that. I did have a question. Your part about harnessing masculinity for productive outcomes. You list 8 attributes here. I'm curious. Obviously, we're not going to go through all 8, but which ones? And I will just kind of list them for the guys: stoicism, competitiveness, dominance, aggression, vigilance, violence, honesty, and self-respect. If you had to look at that list of 8, is there one that's most often misunderstood?
Yeah, I think violence. I mean, really, the reason I chose those is they're also misunderstood. Like violence, dominance, aggression. Like that's why I chose those. Because normally it's like discipline, integrity, hard work. The virtues, the soft, the T-ball type virtues. You just toss them up there and hit them out of the park. They're important. But these are virtues and characteristics that we inherently possess as men that aren't always looked at as favorably. In fact, they're often looked at as unfavorable because they are actually violence. How many times have we seen? Look, pull up Fox News or CNN, and you're going to see all sorts of encounters. I saw 2 this morning about sexual predators being let out of prison have assaulted women. And it's like, okay, well, there's violence right there. There's dominance right there. And you can see it everywhere. And so we automatically equate dominance and violence with this negativity. But let's take violence, for example. If I was walking down the street and I saw a young, attractive woman and I decided that I was going to physically assault this young woman, then I think all of us who are listening would agree that use of violence would be an inappropriate, to put it mildly, use of that ability.
Right.
Now, change the scenario. Let's say, and I'll just use you because you're sitting here. I see you doing that to a woman, and I go over there and I use my propensity for violence to put a stop to it. I think all of us would agree that was a righteous use of violence. So is violence wrong? No, it's how we utilize it and how we use it. So that's what I mean when I'm saying harnessing masculinity for productive outcomes. I can use violence to protect my family. I can use violence to protect other people. I can actually use violence because I'm capable of administering violence to get myself out of situations that I don't want to be in, or diffuse situations I don't want other people to be in, because I'm capable of handling myself to a degree in those environments.
Yeah.
So they're all crucial. It's just how we harness it. And that's why I say masculinity, and this is something that a lot of people disagree with me on. Masculinity is not toxic. A lot of people would say that it is, including the American Psychological Association, which I link in the book. So the American Psychological Association did a study and said, basically at the end of the day, that characteristics attributed to masculinity, such as dominance, competitiveness, stoicism, and aggression. Those were the 4 they used, I believe, are inherently destructive or dangerous to our young men. So what they're saying is that masculinity in and of itself is toxic. Well, that isn't true. But there's another camp out there that says masculinity is good. Well, that isn't true either. Masculinity is not inherently good. It's amoral. I already told you, masculinity is a set of characteristics and behaviors that are linked to our biological makeup. Does it make it right or wrong or good or bad? No, it just is.
Right.
Manliness is what I would consider virtuous, righteous masculinity. It's our ability to harness those characteristics for productive outcomes. And that's what defines us as men, like we started the conversation with.
Yes. I love it, man. Now, I'm curious now, obviously we serve at the line within as Christian men. So when you look at that list of 8 and you think of Christian from a Christian man's standpoint, is there one that you see Christian men struggling with more over the other? And then maybe what could they do to start flipping that? I mean, violence definitely jumps out, but just out of that whole list, when you think about a Christian man in church on a Sunday, does any one of those 8 jump out? Hey, man, we really need to focus here to and start changing the narrative some.
Well, I think dominance would actually be one that you could generally look at and say, well, we're supposed to be meek, right? We're supposed to be mild. We're supposed to be Christ-like. And we are. All of that is true. But Christ was a dominant force.
Yeah.
Even as a young boy. I'm not saying he went out and physically dominated people, but I'm saying he was a dominant force. He is and was the most influential human being to ever walk the planet. Are you telling me that he didn't dominate? No. He knew the word of God inside and out. He was willing to share it. He was willing to rebuke people. He was willing to call it exactly like he saw it. He was willing to walk. Who knows how many miles and miles and miles he walked. He rescued people. He brought people back to life. He cured people. He cured their hearts and their souls and their bodies and their minds. He dominated every facet of his life. That's what I'm talking. I'm not talking about dominating other people. I'm talking about picking up the mantle of whatever it is you do, whether it's podcasting or preaching or building websites or taking pictures or whatever, is learning to become a dominant force. And the reason we don't is because people are intimidated by that. So let's go back to Christ. Christ was literally crucified because people were intimidated by him. That's it. That's the only reason. I mean, I know it was part of the plan and all of this, but what I'm saying is that there were people who were so threatened by him that they crucified him. And that's what society is trying to do to men.
Yeah.
Oh, well, who do you think you are? Oh, you're so arrogant. Oh, you're this. Oh, you're that. Oh, you think you're special. Oh, they just want to drag you down and drag you through the mud. And if one little thing goes wrong, they're like, see, and they try to blow up your world. They'll personally attack you. They'll dox you. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Simply because you've decided to excel in a righteous way.
Right.
And it's the scripture, since we're talking about Christianity, of hiding your light. I don't know what verse it is right offhand, but you don't put it under under a bushel or whatever, however it goes. I'm not a biblical scholar, but I know the verse well enough to butcher it like I am. But it's like, you let it shine.
Yeah. That's right.
Right? You have talents and gifts and abilities and skills that have been granted to you by God. So let them shine. Let other people see them. Let other people see what you're about. And if they have a problem with it, that's okay. But that's their problem, not your problem.
Right.
They don't want you to dominate. But I'll tell you what, God wants you to. He wouldn't have given you what he gave you if you didn't want to use it and harness it and learn how to use it and wield it correctly and powerfully.
Amen. We have these gifts, man. I mean, and when we don't, you're right. We're putting that lamp under the lampstand, and at that point, it's useless. It's right. Completely. You've completely wasted that gift that you have that you could be using to bless other people with, but we're scared. We hold ourselves back. So I think that was a great one, a great attribute to share there. Awesome. Look, we'll take our last break. We'll be right back, guys. I get a chance to talk to guys every week, and one consistent struggle that keeps rising is the lack of community. To address this, we created the Lion's Den to start building a community of Christian brothers with the aim of serving them resources to combat the darkness. We are working hard to bring encouragement, inspiration, and tips to help you be the leader you're predestined to be. As part of the Lion's Den, you'll also be first in line with new opportunities, events, and resources that are designed to serve you in your journey. So hop over to thelionwithin.us to sign up for the Lion's Den for free. That's thelionwithin.us and become a member of the Lion's Den today. So Ryan, I was prepping for this, man, and I was meeting with some of our community, and I threw it out there to our guys in the Lion's Den about, I told them I was meeting with you and we'll be going through the book. And I had two guys hit me up with questions that they had to ask. I said, well, maybe I can do my own little version of Ask Me Anything with Ryan. So, we'll throw it out there. So the first is a buddy of mine named Ethan Good. Him and his brother Dylan, they're awesome. They're 19 years old. They're in college. They're just getting started, right? So I've been mentoring them for a couple of years, and just great young men, hearts for the Lord, hard workers, work ethics. They're the type of guys that I want my daughters to marry one day, right? Guys with these type of characteristics, right? And so Ethan had a question about, what are some ways that he can plan his day effectively and stay disciplined? And he said, you're talking to Ryan Michler. I know his days are effective and he's very disciplined in what he does. Maybe he was hoping to learn some of your best practices that he could apply to the way that he goes about his day. So any advice you got for Ethan there?
Yeah, well, I would say that I'll give you something that everybody would give you, and that's planning out your day in the morning. So I use, this is what I use. This is our battle planner. So I have it with me at all times. And in it is a list of my non-negotiables every single day that I do. And those are things I just do every morning, and then it has a section for notes and things I need to accomplish throughout the day. And some of those will change. And so what I'll do is I'll look at that list that I write down and I'll say, okay, well, what I need to get done today? Well, I have these 10 things I need to get done. And I start, depending on how I feel, I'll either start with the one that's the easiest.
Right.
Because I'm like, if I'm not in it for a day, I'm going to start with the one that's easiest because it's just going to give me a little win and a little momentum.
That's it.
From there.
That's right.
If I wake up on fire and I'm charged and I got a good night's sleep and I'm ready to go, then I might actually want to tackle the hardest thing. Or if I'm up against a deadline, okay, well, I got a deadline. I got to do this hardest thing first.
Right.
But I've got it in front of me, and that's really important. It's always right there in front of me. And then what I do is the system I use is that when I start the task, I put a little diagonal line through it. That means I started it.
Okay.
When I complete it, I complete the X. So I do half of an X, and then when I complete it, I do a full X.
Okay. That's cool.
And I do that because I might be able to start something but not finish it. Maybe I need to make an important phone call. And so in that, I made the call, so I'm going to do half an X. I made the call, but maybe I didn't get a hold of the person because they were busy. So I started it. I did what I could do. Now the ball's in their court. Right. So it's still kind of a win. I can't control everything, but I control the fact that I made that phone call.
Right.
And then when I end up talking to that person, I can go ahead and exit out.
Yeah.
So that's a very simple planning system that I use. But the one that a lot of people don't use is that they don't recap at the end of the day. That's very important. Is you got to go through at the end of the day, and then you pull up that list because you actually have it written down and documented somewhere. And you look at it and you're like, okay, well, what did I get done? And you can see your wins. I got these 7 things done. I feel good about that, but I didn't get these 3 things done. Or maybe I started everything, but 3 things are not finished because they take a little longer, or I'm waiting on something from somebody. Right. And then what you do is you roll over the tasks that aren't completed to the next day. Yeah. And then tomorrow and new things are going to come up that evening or between now and then, and you write those things down. And I just do that every single day, day in and day out. And that's how you can become successful. I wish it was sexier than that. It just isn't. It's not a sexy thing. It's just,
right.
You just do it.
Well, I'm curious, man. So I went to a talk last week, and it was a ex Air Force colonel, and he actually taught tactical aviation, firefighting between F-22s. And what his whole the reason I'm bringing it up is because you talked about going back and seeing how you did. His whole talk was around debriefing, like the power of the debrief. and going back. And I guess the Air Force does debrief. I forget it. Your Army. So was it after action review or something like that? Was
That's
like
what I call it for myself, as an after action review.
There you go. I know the different branches of the military have different terms for what it looks like to basically go back and do that analysis of what happened. But he called his debrief to win. And I think that's just a piece that we miss often. We go throughout our day, click, and then we never look back. So I think that's such sage advice to give, to definitely have that look back and see how we performed.
Yeah, I asked myself in that after action review, and this goes with my end of day planning. I asked myself, what did I get done? Mm-hmm. So I've got my list of 10 things, for example, and I got 7 of those done. What didn't I get done? Well, it's these 3 things that I need to focus on. So I'm going to roll those over tomorrow. Then the third question is, what did I do well? Well, I was really efficient with my day, and I didn't take lunch, and I worked through lunch, and I knew exactly what I was going to do, and the priorities were straight. So I was really good at that.
Right.
What didn't I do so well? Well, I got distracted around 2 o'clock because I jumped on my phone and I got distracted for an hour on Instagram. Okay. Well, good. Like, that's little cues and little feedback you can learn from.
Right.
And then the 5th question is, what am I going to do moving forward? So tomorrow, how am I going to be better?
Adjustments.
Well, I'm still going to look at Instagram because that's part of my business, but I'm going to look in the morning, and I'm only going to look, like, I'm going to set a timer and only do it for 15 minutes.
Right.
Okay. Well, now you're better. Right. So what am I going to do moving forward really moves the needle in a different direction.
Nice.
And it's fast. Like, that shouldn't take you more than 5 or 10 minutes.
Right.
Because if it does, if it's this after action review or debrief and it takes an hour per day, it's like, you're not going to do that.
Right.
This is just quick. And you can do it in any moment. I'll do it after this podcast. Okay. Well, what did I do? I got the podcast done. What didn't I get done? Well, in this case, I actually didn't show up on time. I didn't have the link. Right. And you gave it to me. We just failed to put it into the calendar. So that's a mistake on our end. And so I showed up late, which cut the podcast short. That's good for me to know. What did I do well? Well, I feel like I'm pretty prepared. You're obviously prepared, and we're talking about the book. What didn't I do so well? Well, maybe there's a couple questions that came to me out of left field, and I didn't quite know how to answer those. And so that's good. Okay, what am I going to do the next time I have a podcast? Well, I'm going to make sure the link is in there ahead of time, because that's important. I want to show up and respect my guests. And I want to make sure that I know what the questions, maybe not all the questions, but at least the topic's going to be, so I don't get caught off guard.
Right.
There's an example of what you would do after something as simple as a podcast.
That's awesome. Well, Ethan, take it, apply it, brother. You got it from the man himself right here. So the next question is from our buddy, Mark Thomas. He joined our Lions Den. And his question was, how do lions take back what has been given to us by God while not upsetting the sheep? So I thought it was interesting. He talked about not upsetting the sheep there, but just your take on what we could be doing as men to really start taking a stance more in the world that we're living in.
Well, okay, so let's use that analogy of the lion and the lamb. I'm going to deviate a little bit from that. I get the context of the lion, right? The lion is noble. Obviously, the lion is bold and courageous. All of those things that are wonderful. And sometimes you need to be a lion, and sometimes the sheep don't really matter. It depends on who the sheep are and what they're thinking and what kind of hostility they're spitting at you. And it doesn't really matter what the sheep say about you.
Right.
But sometimes we would be better off being a shepherd. Mm-hmm. The lion doesn't care about the sheep because the lion just wants to eat the sheep. But the shepherd cares about the sheep.
Right.
Because that's his livelihood, and he spends time with the sheep, and he appreciates the nature of the sheep, and and it's like that's his flock, like those are his, and so the shepherd looks at it and has stewardship over the flock,
right?
And so your family, for example, they're not sheep. They might be led astray. They might be indoctrinated or being taught things that aren't going to serve them. Well, you're the shepherd. So embrace them. How do you take it back? Well, you can't do it violently. That's your family.
Right.
You might ostracize them in the process of doing that. Instead, shepherd them.
Yeah.
Be an example, right? Isn't that what the shepherd does? Follow me, right? Be an example to those individuals and show them a better way of living. Show them the right way of living. But as far as the people that don't matter, like, you don't have to worry about winning those people over.
That's right.
But there are going to be people who do matter. And we got to get away from, maybe in those instances, the lion mentality and turn more into the shepherd mentality.
I love it, man. Wonderful answer there. So, Mark, there you go from Ryan. So now, Ryan, we also do the feeding time, the lightning round. I mixed it up a little bit because you already went through our normal questions, but we'll wrap it up with a quick fire lightning round and then let you go, buddy.
Okay.
So right out the gate, man, favorite thing that you like about being a man? Just what is the favorite thing?
That's a funny question.
I know, right?
Because everything I do, I guess, could be done by women too. I mean, I don't know. I like training jujitsu. That's my propensity for physicality and violence. And I really like doing that. I like dominating in that sport and that aspect. And even when I'm being dominated by another man, like maybe I'm a masochist, but I kind of enjoy that too. I'm like, oh, okay, well, there's things for me to still learn here. So
that's cool.
I really love that.
All right. I'm curious, this is more personal stuff. What's your go-to music, man? Do you have a favorite band or anything?
Actually, I don't this is kind of a running joke in my household and with people who are close to me. I don't really listen to music.
Okay.
Like I don't really care about music. Like sometimes it bothers me. It's like too loud or like, maybe I'm just turning into a crotchety old man or whatever, but yeah, if I do listen to music, I'm usually listening to like Red Dirt Country, something like that.
Right.
Cody Jinks is a personal favorite. Granger Smith is a friend of mine, and I really think highly of him. I love his music. Yeah, so those are a couple.
Okay.
I like country mostly if I listen to music at all.
Nothing wrong with that. Now I am curious. Yeah. You're a top level podcaster. I mean, you are the bar, right? But so I'm curious for you. Do you have a favorite podcast?
You know who I really enjoy is Matt Walsh. I love Matt Walsh's podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, he's hilarious and he's such a good troll and he's very well articulated and his program flows really well. Like that's the podcast I listen to most is Matt Walsh or Ben Shapiro. And we've had Ben on the podcast.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Shapiro. And we've worked on getting Matt, but that's been proven to be a challenge.
Right. Well, Shapiro's the man too, man. I love his stuff. So,
and it's easy to say like Rogan,
right.
He's masterful. I mean, just masterful at it, which I learn a lot from him when I listen. Now, not so much the subject as much as the way he conducts a conversation. Right. It's very powerful.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. So you don't like music. Do you like movies? Do you have all-time favorite movie?
Probably, I would say, man, it's so tough. Like there's so many good movies out there. I was talking with somebody about A Knight's Tale, which is something that you wouldn't think of a whole lot.
Right.
Top Gun is another one.
Have you seen the new one, bro?
Yeah, the new one's great. Ooh. Usually the new one is not as good. Like it's so good.
So good.
Braveheart is probably my all-time favorite.
Yeah.
Of course, Gladiator, Patriot, that kind of genre.
Yeah, I'm with
Braveheart is my all-time favorite, I would say.
Okay. So last two questions, Ryan. So who is somebody
actually, I was going to say the cool thing about Braveheart is I actually had the writer of Braveheart on the podcast too, Randall Wallace. No relation, but he was on the podcast a couple years ago.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So last two questions. Who is somebody that you want to interview, but you just haven't got him on the show yet?
Jordan Peterson is on that list.
Yeah.
Yeah. Still struggling to get him and pin him down. Hopefully we can make that happen at some point.
That would be awesome, man. I saw Jordan about 3 or 4 months ago here in North Carolina. He on his tour. It was awesome. And it just blows me away that someone so smart can fill an auditorium up, and half of us don't know a clue what he's saying half the time, but we still they're there, right?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. He's done an amazing job.
Love it, love it. So the last question for you, Ryan, and we'll let you go. So, man, what's one thing that you hope the men listening out here learn from the Masculinity Manifesto?
I would say we hit on it a little bit, but that it's not enough just to be male, that we have to step into manliness, that we have to learn what makes us tick, that we have to learn what we can use for good and bad, and that we can be very aware of that and not be intimidated by it, not let other people intimidate us or cause us to shirk our responsibilities and duties, but that we really step up as men And we learn how to harness all of those things, even the so-called negative characteristics like violence, dominance, competitiveness, stoicism, aggression, vigilance, honesty, self-respect, these things that I talked about.
Right.
And we harness them. We utilize their tools. They're sharp. They're powerful. They're dangerous. But we use these tools for productive outcomes for other people.
I love it. Where do you want them to go to get a copy of the book at?
Amazon is probably best. And if you do, please leave a review. Like, buy the book, wait till you get it, read it, at least to the point where you feel comfortable leaving a review, because I want everybody to leave honest reviews. So read the book or read a couple of chapters, wherever you feel comfortable reading it, leaving an honest review. That goes a really long way. We were number 780 something, 586 in all of books on Amazon the other day. So I think we can break the top 100 if we all get to it.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And you're most active on Instagram, right? So we'll make sure we put that link there. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Anything
absolutely.
else you'd like to share with the listeners out there to line within us today, brother?
No, I just